By the early 2000s, a strained relationship between Game Arts and Studio Alex meant the effective end of the popular Lunar series. However, Game Arts' other popular RPG series, Grandia, enjoyed great success on the Saturn and PlayStation. Grandia Parallel Trippers also came out on the Game Boy Color in Japan, but it failed to make much of an impact and was never brought over to North America. So when the company made an agreement with Square Enix to publish a fourth Grandia game on the PlayStation 2 in 2002, it really seemed like a match made in heaven. This was because Square Enix was the most reputable leader in RPGs, and its stamp of approval meant big-time exposure and marketing. The fourth Grandia game turned out to be Grandia Xtreme, and the decision not to give the game a mainline title was likely because developers made a conscious decision to make it a little different. This is to say, Grandia Xtreme was cut from a bit of a different cloth. So in this video, I'll tell you all about Grandia Xtreme and let you know whether the decision to make it a little different paid off. Before I do that though, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell below for more retro gaming content like this. The world of Grandia Xtreme contains three races: humans, elf-like Arcadians, and beast-like Hosmans. The three coexist under kind of a tenuous peace, but circumstances threaten that situation early in the game. You assume the role of Evan, a hot-tempered young man who became a ranger and can activate hidden technology in the world's ruins. The Noctis army attempts to convince him to investigate nearby natural disturbances called the Elemental Disorder. He's distrustful of Noctis though, so he decides against it, but ultimately, he's swept up in the mission regardless because of circumstances beyond his control. Most of the game revolves around discovering the world's secrets, a theme at the heart of most of the Grandia games. I found that connection to be a good one too that worked with me as a player, because it really was the thing that binds all the games in the series together. There are 7 characters you can recruit throughout the game, each with their own unique moves. My favorite is probably Brandel, an experienced sergeant in the Noctis army who fights with a longsword. Although he's an incredible fighter, he's also a hothead, but there were genuine moments where I felt he grew as a character. Same goes for several other characters in Grandia Xtreme. On the surface, the combat in this game looks a lot similar to that of Grandia 2. It's still a 3D battlefield where the camera rotates around to whatever's happening, and you select turn-based commands. The character and enemy turn gauge is still here as well, but this time it's circular instead of a line. Grandia Xtreme also adds multi-character attacks called feats that are specific to certain combinations of characters. You can think of these as limit breaks of sorts that involve multiple characters, but how they work is a little convoluted. I couldn't completely figure out how they're learned, but my sense is that leveling up the normal character moves and pairing characters together is what unlocks them. You'll know for sure when you learn them though, because their first use is unprompted, after which you'll be able to spend skill points to use them thereafter. It wouldn't be a Grandia game if there weren't mana eggs, so yeah, you still learn magic spells through them, but this time you're able to combine multiple mana eggs together to make new spells. However, I found that a typical playthrough of the game doesn't net you enough eggs to incentivize doing this, so I just ended up leveling up the eggs I found with the original spells. Remember when I said the developers wanted to make Grandia Xtreme a little bit different? Well, they did this by making the game into more of a dungeon crawler than a classic RPG. And by this I mean you don't travel the world to new locations, but instead you only have a single main base of operations, which also happens to contain the only save point in the entire game. There are different dungeons around the world that you have to complete, but the fact that it's a pure grind fest doesn't help any. And even though the dungeons are randomly generated, you're actually forced to revisit and recomplete the same ones over and over and over. The puzzles within them actually aren't that bad, but the fact that they don't change when you repeat them makes it all the more tedious. This combined with the monotony of killing the same enemies over and over really detract from what could have been a fun experience. Another interesting thing about Grandia Xtreme is some really big name voice actors voice the characters in this one. For example, Dean Cain was the voice of Evan, Lisa Loeb was the voice of Lutina, and Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself, was the voice of Colonel Kreutz. You might think this would have made the voice acting a notch above what you can find from other games from this time, but honestly, I don't really think it is. Some of it is adequate, but there are also a lot of moments where the lines seem forced or don't really fit in with the emotion the game is going for.
Typical you'd get all wound up like that. You'd probably be better off sending them a reply, even if the answer is no.
This is honestly pretty disappointing for a game that really seemed to put a lot of effort into this aspect. In the end, Grandia Xtreme is a total mixed bag, at least as far as I'm concerned. The combat is awesome, and it exemplifies everything that's great about this franchise. The move animations especially were of a higher quality than nearly everything else from this era. Even though I liked the characters quite a bit, they didn't quite fit into the game's odd storyline narrative. In fact, there isn't even that much story here at all. It's all overshadowed by long dungeons and grinding. I feel like this game could have been so much better if it went for a more traditional RPG style, rather than utilizing monotonous dungeon crawling. But hey, I guess if that is your cup of tea, you may truly love it. While it's not terrible, it's certainly not the best Grandia game either, and I think you can find other RPGs that are better on the PlayStation 2. So what do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you remember Grandia Xtreme, and how do you think it compares to the other Grandia games? Let me know down below in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and hit that bell below for more retro gaming content as well. If you enjoyed this video and you want early access to the videos I produce and other perks, please consider supporting my channel by becoming a Patreon patron or via the YouTube Join feature.